topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Triversity Talk. I am your host, Wendy Stewart, and I'm happy to be with you on this very spring-like Wednesday. We've waited a really long time, or I've waited a really long time for good weather. So it really makes me happy. And you know what? Right now, I need things that make me happy. I fill a lot of my time. I go to many LGBTQ events, and I have huge support for the community. I'm broadcasting to you from New York City, but I'm involved, of course, on the board of Triversity, and we are located in Milford, Pennsylvania, and we have brick and mortar, an actual center in town, and we are having an upcoming open house. If you would be so kind as to go and visit our website, Triversity, the Pride Center. And we're also, of course, on Facebook. If you're watching the show right now, you are on Triversity's page on Facebook Live. But we're really an amazing organization, and we are supporting the LGBTQ plus community in a time where that support, as you all know, is very, very much needed. So I'm very excited about my guest tonight, so I'll keep my little comments about what I read in the news today, because it's horrific lately. But now the administration, as I refer to them, wants to pull funding from the University of Pennsylvania for their endorsement of trans athletes. So all I can say is I just hope that the lawsuits keep coming, and the best all of us can do is support our community, get behind people, and try and help them any way we can. I try and do it with this show. That's why I have this show. So I was very excited to bring tonight's guest on. I heard about them from one of our board members, Gretchen Pollock, and I'd like to thank Gretchen for having open eyes and finding a really great person. You know, any of you can reach out to me if you know someone and you want to have them on the podcast. Please absolutely reach out to me. I'm Wendy Stewart on Facebook. You can always find me. But this guest tonight totally impressed me. First of all, they have their own podcast, and they're up to, I thought, 65 episodes, but I was informed in our little chat before the show, it's actually 66. Our guest tonight watched the culture around trans people go from what does that mean to public enemy number one, and boy, is that the truth, leading into the big and small of queer history through their podcast, Life Through a Queer Lens. I'd like you all to welcome Kit LK. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh my God, this is like, you're such a pro, 66 historical episodes. Now, I was able, even though you broadcast on TikTok, and I tend to stay, I can't, I have no time left. I'm on so much social media. So I'm not doing TikTok, but I was able to access your shows. They are really, really impressive, Kit. The fact that you have really delved into queer history, and you go way back in some of your shows too.
Yeah, we try to touch on the fact that queer history has always been here, and by try to go back as far as we can with as much of the research as possible.
Now you also have a co-host, Janine or Janine? Janine. And okay, because Janine spells it Jenene, and I'm like, oh, I really need to find out. I butcher people's names. Kit is easy.
I feel that.
I know, right? Comes with the term. But you have a co-host, you put this podcast together, and you're young and you care about queer history because we all know history repeats itself. We all know if we study history, right, it really tells you what you can expect in the future. How did all this start for you? What made you care enough to put together your own podcast?
So researching queer history has kind of always been something that's been really important to me. I started researching, well, it started with a special interest actually with the history of mental institutions and forced institutionalization throughout the 18th and 19th centuries.
Wow.
And from there, it kind of turned into why were people forcibly institutionalized, and very frequently queer people were coming up as oftenly institutionalized. Civil rights leaders from the Black Panther Party were often institutionalized.
Absolutely.
And how so many marginalized groups had mental health used against them at the same time that I was struggling with my own mental health. And I also was kind of coming to terms with being queer, but I think it was more at the point where I just thought I was a really, really, really strong ally. Like I was like, no, I'm just like really into being an ally.
Right.
But I didn't end up coming out as anything until 16, long after I was already really deep into research of queer history.
You were researching, how old were you when you were researching queer history?
I mean, I would say from the institutionalization period, I started really getting into queer history research around freshman year of high school.
Wow.
I wrote 2 papers in high school, one about the entire history of homosexuality in health from the 19th century to 2011. And then another one about nature versus nurture when it comes to homosexuality and any scientific evidence that falls along either side of that argument. And
I guess I'm so impressed by this because people are doing their PhD papers on this. You know, I don't know, in high school, they are studying their own identities, and many people have come out in high school. But no, I haven't had one person on. I know a lot of people that was so committed, right, to queer history at such a young age, and it's really great because I talk about this a lot with people. I feel in many ways, and I know in many ways, we are now watching history being rewritten, right? And that all started with, and I'm going to reference to the term fake news, right? That was the first red flag that we were all in trouble. Okay. Because after that, truth started to fall apart. And that's as much as I'll say on that. Someone like yourself that can actually do shows on this, because I'm a great believer in these shows. And I'm a great believer, you know, yours like mine are both audio and visual. It makes me feel like I can really connect with people if they see the visual. For my own purposes, it's stronger. And I watched a bunch of yours, and you know, you totally connect. Everything that you're saying has such amazing credibility. So the fact that you finally decided to do a podcast, what was behind that?
So actually, that was mainly Janine. She knew my mom. She knows my mom. Yeah. She knows my mom from work. And my mom speaks very highly of me. Hi, Mom. I think she's watching this.
Yeah. Hello, Mom. You did a great job. I have a daughter that's just a couple of years older than you. And people tell me I did a good job, too. So, you know what, kid, as moms, we want to hear that. Okay. So,
my mom kind of connected us, and I had a lot of the information, but I kind of struggle with confidence and not feeling quite so anxious about putting myself out there.
wow.
So it was really Janine who had a lot of the drive and the confidence that got it started, and I had a lot of just the information. And she also had a lot of the equipment and a lot of the skill in editing that I'm still very new in. So genuinely, if it wasn't for her, this would not have happened, truly.
But you know what? That's incredible because that's called a collaboration. Right. And Janina, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is an ally, right? Cisgender.
She is lesbian, and okay. I believe is on her own gender exploration journey, as I feel like we all are in some way, shape, or form.
I personally everyone likes to give their pronouns or their label or whatever. I personally stay away from that just because as a human being, I'm everywhere. And I would love to live in a world where everybody was everywhere and supporting everyone else, right? So, really amazing that the two of you were able to collaborate and come up with this wonderful podcast. I have to tell you, when people see you on camera, there's no way they would ever sense any kind of anxiety. You're really great on camera, and that's a
Thank you so
skill.
much.
You know,
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I actually have a little stim toy tucked down here that I'm kind of playing with, just because it's a lot of that excess energy that tends
wait,
to
hold
come
that
from just
toy up. My
lifelong
daughter
anxiety.
has that too. Let me just.
Yeah.
The two of you would get along. So she has other things that she does. There's other things that you can do with these toys for anxiety, but that's hilarious. She has one of those. So how did you decide, like, from your first episode, what the first one was going to be?
So the first couple of episodes are actually just about Janine and I. They're basically just introductions to the host, and then we jump straight into Stonewall. And I think the reason we decided to do that is because Stonewall is kind of looked at as like this mythical event of queer history.
Right.
And even like talking to or reading a lot of the accounts from people who were there, a lot of them were so drunk or so high that they don't remember really. Like most of the events, there was a lot of weed. There was, it was
a lot of it was real. I'm going to be honest with you. And I know some of the people that were there. What all of us are hearing now is so skewed. Okay. And God bless Marsha P. Johnson. But, and I'm so happy that Marsha P. Johnson's become this amazing icon, but back in that time, Marsha P. Johnson was just like another trans person that was ignored or kicked to the curb or not quite understood. So it's so funny because, like, you're talking about Stonewall, like it was like a fantasy. That's what it's become. And when you talk to some of the old timers, and by the way, my friend Teresa Sequoia, I'm going to have him watch this. He is one of the original Stonewall bartenders. And yeah, he was there, and I'm in the Imperial Court with him. Boy, could he tell you stories, and it's just been,
love that.
It is, and it's just been glorified or whatever. But thank goodness for you wanting to start there. I think that that's a great place to start. And
we discussed the fact that there's this whole idea of Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera having thrown the first bricks. And while, yes, their activism 100% kickstarted that night, they didn't get to Stonewall until hours after the rioting had already started.
Absolutely. One of our standing jokes is, and when I meet up with people that were there and we have a couple of drinks, okay, who threw the first brick? Really? I love that you know this, Kit. This is just great. Right.
Oh, that makes me really happy. Thank you.
But you see how, and this is why your podcast is so great, because you see how things change. And I watch a bunch of your episodes. You're doing your research, which is really great. Obviously, looking into queer history is something that is completely interesting to you.
It's fascinating. It's an entire world, but at the same time, it is so deeply connected to world history. Like it is queer history, but it's also human history.
Thank you. And what we're talking about now, especially with like the T being taken out of the LGBTQ, that this is something in history right now that's happening. And myself and a lot of my friends that are in the media, everything we want to do now is to put the T back, because we can't let that. The only thing that would be is a part of history that was very ugly and most of us didn't agree with, and it needs to come back. And by calling it out, right, we're saying it's wrong. It's something that just should not happen. So I'm curious, how is someone like yourself, because you're so interested in this, how are you mentally dealing with what's going on now? I have another podcast that I do, and we were talking about this, and we're all a lot older than you, and we were talking about this even today in our opening. How are you doing mentally with everything going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of taking it day by day. I have a lot of queer friends, and it's kind of
Good.
just a game of all of us reaching out to the other and, hey, how are you doing? Hey, do you want to hang out? Like just this past weekend, I was at my friend's house and we watched Dead Poets Society, which
Right.
is a queer film. I will hear no argument otherwise.
So
It was great.
you're all supporting each other.
Mhm.
Right. And that's really important. I think the other thing I want to say to you is, there are, and I even have them, there are some days when you're just like, oh my God, it can't get any worse. But every day changes. And I'm sure you've learned that. And the feelings that you have on one day that are brought on by whatever is going on, they can change the next day by a positive happening. As
Oh,
you know,
absolutely.
there's a lot of pushback going on now. And
Mhm.
that is what has to continue to happen. And the pushback,
Genuinely.
yeah.
Yeah, and allies, like truly, if allies need to be, if you see someone who is struggling, like offer to go to the bathroom with them. I
Thank you.
promise you that makes so much difference. I have cis male ex partners and a present partner who is a cis male who, if I'm going to the men's restroom, they're coming with me. I will
Thank
not
you.
go in there alone. It's just not an option.
Right. No, so let's, and you talk about some of these things on your show. Let's talk about safety. What kind of safety measures do you think people can take?
So, one of my best pieces of safety advice that I actually got from just the punk community in general is all of your vests, your backpacks, all of the things that you like to put like pins on or patches on, do not put them on your back. Put them on your front only,
Right.
especially if they are like a pride themed thing, or if they're politically motivated in any way, or if they're discussing a social movement. Keep them on your front because you want to be able to see how people are reacting to the things you're showing them. And if they're reacting poorly, they're much less likely to do something if they can see you seeing them
That
rather
is
than coming at you from behind.
so brilliant. And if you wear it behind, you're really making yourself a target. I
Yeah, it's
won't
the
even,
definition of a target on your back versus
right.
target on your front.
Right, but at least had I don't know how you know this, but the eye contact thing is something, if someone's going to challenge you and you make eye contact with them, that will often make them back down. And that is an incredible thing to know. Even in terms of your car, I won't put anything. I won't put a rainbow flag on the back of my car because I don't need to be profiled. And
No, that's fair. That's
certainly,
something I get mad at my mom about a lot because she has a lot of like pride stickers on the back of her car to show that she supports me. And I'm like, I love you so much, but I
right,
need you here and I need you safe.
right. Right. My daughter feels the same way about me. And I'm a speaker on all of this. I'll go anywhere and talk. But when I am in Pennsylvania, remember, I'm in New York City now. I could drive around here with any kind of rainbows on my car. But when I'm in Pennsylvania, I fly under the radar in that way because I don't want to get hit from behind. I did have that happen. I was sure someone just profiled me. I think I was going to an event and I had a lot of blonde hair pieces on, and I drive a Subaru, and I was sure they were looking, oh, LGBTQ supporting liberal. Now I could be wrong about that, but I ended up getting into an accident, and the lesson is learned. And I love that you know this already and that you're sharing this.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I remember being a young, basically a trans kid who didn't know they were trans, but I was always the weird one. I wore tutus to school. Like, I was always very subject to bullying. And as you age, having been subject to bullying, you kind of just realize that, like, certain people never grow out of being bullies. It's just the same type of bully, but it's an
Absolutely.
adult now.
Right.
Yeah, and that's why like making eye contact with them genuinely does work. And this is coming from someone who is 4'11". I am small. I am sure I am not threatening in stature, but genuinely, if you show people like I'm not just gonna back down and you make
Right.
eye contact with them, they kind of start to wonder like, is this person a little bit unhinged? Should I maybe
Good.
not pick this fight?
Right.
Yeah.
I love that you make them feel unhinged. And you know what? 4'2", you have to stand up for yourself.
Yeah,
You
I
have
was 4'11".
oh,
I've
okay,
got I'm almost 5 foot, but I'm still like it's multiple times there's men that are just like I'm just like this looking up at them,
right.
and they clearly kind of have an issue with just the way I present myself to the world. And you kind of can't really give them an inch or else they will take a mile.
Exactly. But you know what? You know that. So in terms of like your own experiences, let's talk about you growing up. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Sussex, New Jersey. It was in
Okay.
Wantage, technically.
Yep.
Yep,
Pretty
I went to High Point.
rural.
Yeah.
Sussex is
Oh yeah.
definitely rural.
Yep, I went to High Point High School. It was a fun time. Miss
Well,
Strout was my favorite teacher. If she ever sees this, I love you.
oh, that's so great. Do you know Zoe, she runs Sussex County Pride?
Oh, I might. Back then, I was very isolated. It was one of those things where I was doing my research and I was learning a lot about queer history, but I wasn't really getting involved in the queer community in the real world. That was
Right.
something that I struggled with for a long time, was getting out of that shell and realizing that like what I have to say genuinely does matter.
Oh, what you have to say is really huge. I mean, no pressure, but I expect big things from you. 5 years from now, even. I think I told you when we were talking before the show, my co-host on my other show, Tim Moss he's 62. He's been in the game for a very long time. He does a ton for not only LGBTQ, but now he's really honing in on trans. Okay. He really feels we have to put 200% behind trans because of everything that's gone on. And Tim often accuses, queer people in their late 30s, early 40s as not knowing enough, not caring enough, and not understanding that all of us who came before them really laid the groundwork, right? I wish for you, Kit, that we had a different administration because it was all going so well. I watched, I came through the time of AIDS, right? Awful. And we got out of that. And then we had ways of keeping people alive. Then they came out with PrEP. Then we had marriage equality. And my God, I know a gazillion same sex couples who have had children through surrogates or adopted them. And everybody was going in a direction of one big happy family. And trans was like so accepted, and people getting behind transgender people and making sure whatever hormones they were taking were legitimate, right? Not some concoction that you bought on a black market. So watching for me right now, what is happening is just like, we really all have to get together and we really have to be on it. And as you probably know, there's a lot of organizations in the LGBTQ community supporting trans where people can call if they need support. If they need, the medical guidance thing, where I feel we're all lucky we're in the Northeast. I think of people that are in these states that are shutting down people's ability to get their hormones that have been on these hormones for decades. How can you get away with doing that? How can that even be legal?
It shouldn't be legal, but unfortunately, trans people got a lot of visibility in a very short period of time.
Which
Because
made them
I came out as trans in 2014, and when I came out, barely anyone knew what being trans was,
wow.
at least not around me. So
No,
it
not I
seems
would
like,
say in Sussex, probably not. Right.
yeah. Um, So it seems like we got a lot of visibility in a very short stint of time without the legal protections to make sure that that visibility didn't end with persecution.
Right. Right.
Because like visibility alone isn't enough to protect a marginalized group of people. Look at any other marginalized identity. They're very visible and have been for a long time. They're just still being persecuted against because visibility alone isn't enough. There has to be legal protections in place for those marginalized groups so that that visibility doesn't just end with persecution.
Right. Right. But now everything is kind of up for grabs. So it's a very brave new world out there. So with your own show, what are some of the favorite topics that you've covered in the 2 years that you've had the show?
Oh goodness. Personally, I really love covering the history of the different identity terms. So we've covered like the history of the word sapphic and where that word itself came from and how it became an identity term. Same thing with the word Achillean, where that term came from and how it became an identity term.
So
We've
I don't know
discussed,
where Achillean, I know the word and I know the roots of it, but I don't know where it came from. So you can give me a history lesson.
Awesome. Well, so it comes from Achilles, and it specifically comes from Achilles' relationship to Patroclus throughout his epic, throughout his story.
Wow.
Um, when Patroclus is described as like his closest companion very frequently,
Right.
and throughout their relationship, um, sorry, it's kind of losing track a little bit. This was an episode we did a while ago, and
Yeah,
there's
but
been a
this is
lot of
great. I don't,
interest
I,
in
you know,
Meta now.
I don't even know this detail. This is great.
But yeah, basically, they had a very loving and protective relationship. Specifically, Patroclus of Achilles. He wanted him to stay calm and stay safe and things of that nature. And at one point during the Trojan War, Achilles is shamed and decides like I'm not fighting in this anymore, even though they needed him, and he just leaves. So Patroclus says, "Okay, I guess I'll just do what it is I always do and try to keep him safe." So he dressed up in Achilles' armor and pretended to be Achilles and went to the battlefield and ended up being killed by Paris. And Achilles' devastation and rage in the aftermath of Patroclus' death leads to a horrific end for Paris. Horrific end for Paris. And then leads to Achilles' own death when Paris's brother comes for vengeance. Like it just
Wow.
leads to this endless trail of death
Yeah.
and revenge and
Yeah.
pain, all because of what happens to Patroclus and the utter grief he feels from losing his love.
Yeah. I wonder when they teach that in school, if they teach it from the great love. I now that you're talking, this is coming back to me. I think I remember this from high school, but nowhere near taught about these two people loved each other. I don't
Yeah,
remember ever hearing that, which is key.
in in a lot of modern and specifically Christians looking at Greek mythology translations and interpretations, it's just that they have like a brotherly bond. But when you look at the way the ancient Greeks studied the Iliad and studied the story of
Yeah.
Achilles, it was a model of Greek male love. That was like their relationship was the model of the way Greek men should love each other. It was meant to be protective and heroic and have a certain manliness to it because again, this is ancient Greece. They're not going to, have the same gender ideas that we do now. So there is a certain like manliness to
Yeah.
it, but it was the ideal Greek love, male love. That's the Iliad, and specifically Achilles and Patroclus' relationship.
And that was never taught that way in school. I'm sure like when they taught it, I'm sure a lot of what you had to research yourself. Am I correct?
Yeah, specifically, there was one paper that truly opened my eyes called He Who I Loved as Dearly as My Own Self, I believe, or He Who I Loved as Dearly as My Own Name. And it was basically the story of Achilles and Patroclus and looking at the Iliad through the lens of their story being the ideal Greek male love.
Wow.
And yeah, it was really fascinating. I love learning this history and understanding that, again, it is just human history. Even like Alan Turing is still affecting the world to this day through things like the Turing test, where that's how we figure out if an AI can be tricked or if a human can be tricked into thinking an AI is human. It's how we
Right.
test the advancedness of AI. That's named after a gay man, Alan Turing, who also solved the German Enigma code, which is the only reason we won World War II.
And that's where I knew the name from, the German Enigma code. It's just so impressive what you know about history. Now, I'm assuming you went to college, I'm assuming, yeah?
I went to college twice and dropped out both times.
Okay, because it probably was not a good fit for you because you know so much already. But when I'm listening to you, there are so many great universities that would, if you get your degree, right, that would hire someone like you if you were working for a master's and a PhD to teach. What you know, Kit, is a lot. And the way you present it is really interesting. And my gosh, there's so many that could benefit from somebody like you telling these historical events that happened. Because what happens is, I don't have to tell you, and I'm sure because you've researched all of this, it gets really watered down, right? And they have to make it really safe. Like gay, homosexuality, same-sex lovers, in history, if you go back to the 1600s, 1700s, 1800, it was all happening back then.
Yep. Yeah, there's a quote along those lines that I've always loved where it says, history will call them best friends, comrades,
Right.
roommates, anything but lovers, because history hates lovers.
That's a t-shirt.
Yes.
My God, we should like market those and sell those. But that is also very, very true.
Yeah.
For me, and this is probably something you know a lot about, I have a friend, Hawaiian, that talks about two spirits. I have another friend from Italy that also talks about two spirits. I forgot what the Italian word is. Have you delved into that at all in your research?
I haven't, but that is something that I definitely want to do come future episodes, is delve into different identities across the globe and the way that specifically different languages handle different identities. Because I know like certain languages are gendered languages, and
Absolutely.
in order to be non-gendered to a certain extent, you do have to break the grammar in a way that we do not have to in English.
Right.
And that is fascinating to me. I
Yeah.
would love to do an episode, even interviewing someone from one of these cultures who understands that way better than I feel like I could as someone who only speaks English. I've
Right.
never really been able to learn another language. I've never had a teacher that's been able to make it stick.
Well, some people have an aptitude for languages. I'm certainly not one of them. But then my sister could speak Latin and French. She just had an aptitude for languages. But your aptitude as a historian, which is why I'm like telling you I want to push it further, because what you have to share out there is really very, very much needed. So the two spirit thing, when after like we say goodbye and everything tonight, I want you to Google that for both Hawaiian culture and Italy, and just start reading about it. Also, Native American exists, and so the fact that this exists and has for hundreds of years really makes it fact. And the meaning of the two spirits is male and female, right? Living inside one person. That is something we're just hitting upon now. And I really thought we were moving along with it in our culture. And then it's like, it's going back into the box again, where, it's going to be up to all of us to have these conversations. That's what I want to say, right? So when did you first discover drag?
Oh God. Well, so when I was younger, I was shown a lot of movies from someone who has since voted for this administration, which is just a very
Wow.
interesting turn of events for me. But I was shown a lot of movies as a young child that the present administration would look at someone like and would be convinced, oh, that's what turned that kid trans.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah. like I watched Rocky Horror when I was very young. I watched there's one with Patrick Swayze and John Leguizamo. The name always
Oh God,
escapes
I
me.
can't remember the name, but that was a great movie.
Yeah, something Judy Newmar, I think.
Tu Wong Fu.
Yeah.
Tu Wong Fu, Julie Newmar, and my best friend who passed away, Sweetie, was one of the big drag performers in that. Was hosted when they were all in that big club. That was my friend, and Sweetie was so excited getting that role. Sweetie was an amazing actor. When they weren't Sweetie, and really Sweetie used he pronouns. When they weren't being Sweetie, they were Daniel Booth, and we met in acting class, and just a brilliant performer, and ended up becoming a very famous drag queen. But I love that you referenced that movie, because that was a big part for Sweetie in that movie. That was a great film.
Oh my God. Honestly, that just made me like fan person so hard. That's incredible.
I love that you watch that. And of course, Rocky Horror, I didn't know anybody in that film, but now you're talking a classic film and a really important film, because how many films do we pay tribute to every Halloween or, every year?
Yep. No, honestly, that film has definitely lived on in pop culture way more than people expected it to. And I think it's because of how free people were allowed to be
Well,
while
how old were you when you
witnessing it.
saw it? How old were you when you saw it?
Oh, wow. I so my father passed away when I was 11, and sometimes I tend to base other events around like when that happened. So I'm
Right.
trying to think if he was still alive when I saw it. I think I was around like 9 or 10.
Okay, so
I
it made
think
impression on you, Kit. What was the impression? Like, what was it about this film? Because there are people I remember saying, "Oh, that's such a weird film," and I remember loving it. What was it like for you? What was the impression?
oh, I loved the dancing. I loved the loudness of it. It was just realizing that gender, something that I had kind of been taught was like stone, was in fact clay or sand. Like
It
it
can
can be
totally be
created.
molded.
Yeah, like it was that was the movie that really went, oh, like this is a toy at this point. This is something I can just mess around with and
Right,
figure out as I age, and that's okay.
right.
And it was a really cool experience, especially as someone who struggled with liking myself for a really long time just in general, and having a lot of anxiety, having a lot of self-esteem issues. I really feel like queerness has helped me embrace myself in ways I never thought possible.
Well, because queerness in in a supportive situation, and if it's who you are, makes you totally acceptable, right? And I talk about this with my daughter all the time. She went to Smith College. That's a extremely edgy, queer, rough college, and it is rough. A lot of the women there, I was like, whoa. But it made her very strong, and it made her very accepting of herself, which is really important. And she was fortunate. She grew up in New York City and went to a small school where different perceptions were tolerated. I'll just put it that way. If you're in a big school environment, and especially high school, Kit, is the absolute worst. You get bullied, and the not fitting. And I often say, I even feel this way now. I feel like we've always been in a Barbie culture, right? That the people pleasing, blonde haired, blue eyed Barbie, which is how people perceive me, and it's the furthest thing from the truth. But we're in a culture that's like that, and a cheerleader culture or whatever. So it's especially hard in adolescence if you don't fit that mold. And guess what? Lots of people don't fit that mold. But lots of times, and this, kids end up feeling really bad about themselves. And that's awful.
Yeah, like no one should feel bad. No one should have to feel bad about themselves, especially for things about themselves that they can't change or even just don't want to change.
Right.
Like, yeah, I could have stopped wearing a tutu to school.
I,
That's
I love,
boring.
I love
I'm not boring.
right. Right. I love that you wore that tutu. I have right now, my closet's over there. I've got 5 in there. And I started wearing tutus to Studio 54. That's how I got in initially. I connected to the tutu the minute you said it. But yeah, you're right. Tutus should be embraced and differences should be embraced. But you know what? A lot of that's got to do with how kids are brought up and how kids are taught tolerance. And, I'm sorry to say, we're seeing the backlash now, the intolerance now, and the bullying. And certainly schools. I read, I don't have a kid in Delaware Valley High School, but I read the local paper all the time. And, we have kids that are like, I don't feel like I'm in a safe space. Obviously, you didn't either. I don't think any kid should feel that way. And I think administration should bend over backwards to make all the students feel good. Did you have a GSA in your school?
We did. Again, I wasn't really a part of it. I was already kind of having some difficulties with being bullied for just being perceived as queer. And then when I came out and I started dating someone in my own grade who was um, also presenting female at the time, it just kind of, it wasn't a large GSA. No one in the GSA felt very protected.
Yeah,
A
that's
lot of them kind of came and went because it was just kind of difficult to stay in there.
right.
So yeah, and I mean, I have memories of, being shoved into a locker and scraping up my whole arm and then being called the F slur in the process and going to the office and saying something about it and then literally telling me that he only did it because he had a crush on me. And I was like,
Wait, so an adult school
no,
oh, the
it was
boy.
it was yeah, it was the student. The administrator said that the student only did it because he had a crush on me.
Right, but that's the point. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know who to point the finger at
I'm
here.
sorry.
The kid, right? Who do you point the finger at? The administrator that should have like taken this kid aside and called this kid's parents. Although, the fact that this kid did that in the first place is indicative of like that kind of behavior is okay, that they're coming from a home that empathy is not at the top of the hit parade. There's other things that are. That's a terrible experience. I love that you have survived all of this, Kit, and
Thank you.
that you're out there and you're doing your thing. Where do you see yourself going? Like when you
Oh
think,
goodness.
yeah, when look at what you're doing. You're very young and you're doing, you've got this podcast, you have an opinion, you're so smart. So where do you see yourself going with all of this?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I am making jewelry as of now. It's basically like a year-round pride kind of jewelry line that I'm really excited about. I've been hand making stuff for years as just a way to separate from the world and just craft with my hands.
You're a creative
Um,
person. You're a creative person.
Yeah, I also write novels and poetry and a lot of like nonfiction stuff as well. That's something I've been doing for the longest amount of time. After my father passed at 11, I immediately turned to poetry as a way to cope. And it just kind of snowballed from there into handwriting full-length novels instead of doing math class. So
I mean, this is amazing. Did you have teachers that knew you had this ability, encouraging you along the way?
Oh yeah, definitely. I said Miss Strout. Miss Strout she was my rock throughout high school. If it wasn't for my creative writing teacher, I do not think I would have graduated truly. I think I either would have dropped out or worse. She was genuinely, truly there for me when I felt like not many others were. I had some really cool history teachers too, Mr. Campbell and Mr. Langen. They were a lot of fun. They taught me a lot about how to look at present day and past events critically and closely. But
From
yeah,
watching
I had some teachers.
from watching your podcast, you're a critical thinker and you've got a lot of this really great stuff to pay forward. So not to put pressure on you, but people try and learn that. They go to college and they take courses in critical thinking and they try and write using critical thinking. You already have a lot of this stuff. There are people I meet, and I have to tell you, that I've interviewed on this show and my other show that are extremely successful, well-known writers, entertainers, and their stories and their paths are very similar to yours. And school was not a thing for them. The only thing it differs with you is like the amount of history and stuff that you know. And I think it's just because it floats your boat so much, you can't even get enough of it,
Every time I learn something new, it's like, who can I share this with? How can I gotta remember this. It's always a really fun thing.
Right. So your jewelry, which is another part of your creative psyche, where can people get your jewelry? Do you sell it on a website or at fairs?
So as of now, I don't have a website. However, come this August, I'm going to be at Triversity's Pride selling jewelry.
I'm so excited. I know we're having vendors, and I didn't know you were one of them, but
I am.
That's so exciting. That's great. Our Pride is really fabulous.
I'm really excited for it. It's my first time going, and I can't wait.
But once you get used to selling at events, it's really fun. I mean, you're obviously crafting nice stuff. And Sussex County Pride, they also have Pride there. There's so many prides that happen now. It starts in June and it goes all the way through till I think there were even some prides happening like the end of August last year.
That's crazy.
Isn't that great? It used to be like Pride Week. Then it became Pride Month, and now it's like Pride Months. It's gotten to the point where it's like, oh my God, not another Pride. Have you ever been to New York City Pride?
I haven't. I've done Lancaster Pride and New Hope, PA Pride.
Great. And wasn't that a great experience?
Mm-hmm. New Hope was incredible.
New Hope was incredible. I've done 40 prides, New York City prides, 40 of them, including World Pride. And I've seen the Pride March go through incredible evolutions. It went through really being something you did not want to be a part of. A lot of my friends dropped out of because the people that were part of it were not really great examples of what it meant to be queer. It went through that. And then it started to get more corporate. And then it went too far in that direction. So people dropped out of it then because, oh no, now it's too corporate. So lately, I go to the New York City Pride. I march in it every year. But now we also have the other Pride, which is the queer
Liberation March. Yeah.
And it's no corporations, no floats. It's very loose. But the thing that we have that I hope maybe you can come in, we have the drag march, which is the day before Pride. Kit, it's so fabulous. You would just love it so much. Just how people do themselves and the instruments people play. And we walk from the East Village all the way. You can pretty much guess we end at Stonewall, and it's just great. And it's always important, but this year I think it's probably more important than ever.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm going to be going to as many prides as I can this year. Truly,
I love it. That's really great. I want us all to stay in touch. So I can't believe it. I don't know where the time went. Can you tell us what your next episode of your podcast is?
So the next actually we're doing is, I believe, Love and Stone, which is about the history of graves being themed after people's sexualities. So people actually designing their gravestones with their sexuality and their activism in mind. And we're also going to be teaching people how to be buried under their proper name in the same episode. So it's like a dual thing where we're going to go a little bit into some fun history, but also give people a lot of good information about how to be sure that you'll be buried by the name that you have demanded for yourself, which is, I feel
that you've taken for yourself. Yeah. Right. The thing about the
name you should have.
Exactly. And the thing about the stones, the gravestones, I didn't know that. I know a lot of stuff, but I love this. I rarely get somebody on that just know this is so great. And we have to have you like teaching a course or something. I'm determined.
I would love that, honestly. You've definitely inspired me to look into that, I will say. I would
Yeah,
honestly
you might have to like just go back to school for a little bit just because they want some what they call credentials. And maybe you could just take courses that you like to get that. But with what that's really something you can certainly be able to share with the world, and the world needs a you right now. I can't
thank you so much.
I can't thank you enough for coming on here. Where can people find your podcast?
Yes, so we are on Spotify, we are on Apple and Amazon podcasts at Life Through a Queer Lens. We're on TikTok and Tumblr on Life Through a Queer Lens as well. And then I am personally on Blue Sky at gender/degenerate. So if y'all would like to give me a follow over there and keep up on some poetry stuff that I'll be posting, some art stuff, some just weird, cool stuff, go ahead and follow me over there. That's more like a personal thing. I'll also be posting podcast stuff there, but that'll be mainly my art stuff.
Podcast there as well. Are you on Instagram at all?
I am not, unfortunately. I kind of got chased off of Instagram by a gaggle of incels who,
Oh, they'll just gaggle off into the sunset. We don't need them anymore.
I hope so.
Well, thank you, Kit, so much. I'd like to do one thing before I say goodbye. I always take a picture. So look into the camera. Cool. Thank you so much. I wish you all the best. And thank you to everyone who tuned in tonight. We'll be back next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks.